on Bay Area psychology, we turn our attention to children of incarcerated parents, a population which is all too often overlooked. Parental incarceration can create acute trauma for these children related to sudden separation, abrupt changes in caretakers and residencies, and frequent secrecy about the disappearance of their parent. These children are often expected to just adapt to their highly stressed, often chaotic caretakers, who also are struggling to create stability in their own lives. Even when children do visit the parent in custody, I have to wonder how they translate this experience for themselves. Some way, incarceration can be normalized as the struggling child coping with abandonment strives to identify with the missing parent. I wonder sometimes if the eventual result may be the multi-generational incarceration that we often see. We are fortunate to have returning guest Lynn Woodward, who has 32 years' experience in juvenile justice, sits on the Juvenile Justice Commission, and is offering a model to address the needs of these children through Friends Outside. Lynn, I want to welcome you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming back. When you were last here, we talked about kids and guns, and I thought you might want to give us some update. How did that legislation go?
The handgun ordinance successfully passed in the city of San Jose, and now there is a move to broaden that ordinance to the entire county so that all the cities in the county will be consistent with that main ordinance. So there is progress.
Good for you. That must have been really satisfying.
It was very satisfying.
For you. I know you worked very hard.
Thank you. Yes.
Well, now we're going to talk about today another piece of this situation with the crime and with guns. And I know that you have recently joined Friends Outside, and can you tell us exactly what your position is with them?
I'm a part of a very unique collaboration between the Cleo Ulau Center in Palo Alto, who has hired me to be the Mental Health Project Director at Friends Outside. And the collaboration seeks to change the Friends Outside programs for youth and families from a recreational social services model to include a clinical perspective, so that we're offering a broader base of services in a traditional social services agency.
Okay, so it sounds like it's going to have a lot more dimension to it.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
You know, in the opening, I was wondering to myself, and I do often wonder this, and given your length of experience, when I mentioned multi-generational incarceration, have you had experience seeing this over time?
Yes, I have.
Okay.
And you were absolutely right in your opening. You were right on with the things that you said about this population. And unfortunately, it's getting worse because of the three strikes situation. We're finding more and more people incarcerated. And we estimate that there are about 1.5 million children in the United States who have a parent in custody. So that's a significant number of children who are going through a very unique set of traumas. And at Friends Outside, we serve about 600 kids during the year who have a parent in custody. Very often they have the multiple caregivers, as you said, or caregivers who are very stressed and experience a wide range, a very long laundry list of difficulties that most children don't have to face.
Do you, when you look at the percentages, I mean, do you happen to know the split between how many of them are the male fathers going to jail versus the moms? Do you have any guess about that?
No, I don't, because it varies from month to month. But I do know that 80% of women in custody have children, and 50% of men have children. And recently was told at a commission meeting that on any given day, about 40% of the kids in juvenile hall are parents. So that is a mind-boggler.
The children themselves.
The delinquent youngsters in custody are already parents. So therein lies your multi-generational implications already happening. And for some of the kids that we see at Friends Outside, even though we're trying very diligently to do interventions that will make a difference in their lives, they have no sense of hope or sense of future. And so all they can see is that, well, when I grow up, I'm going to go to jail like Daddy. You know, even though we try to expose them to a variety of different kinds of experiences that will enrich their lives, it's very hard for them to think that those experiences can apply to them.
Well, you know, I've been thinking a lot about that because, as I mentioned to you, I started doing some work out at the Boys Ranch, and it strikes me that in some ways they need to see somebody do it. You know, I was talking about, you know, I'm different culturally from them. The reality is I was raised middle class.
Right.
I had options that they don't have, and I guess I am experiencing for myself the limitation of that in terms of, you know, they profoundly need to see somebody who looks like them, comes from the same background, achieve.
Right.
You know, I can't help but feel like, you know, a poly white social worker who goes in to, you know, help those poor unfortunate children. I mean, there's a part of me that I don't want to diminish the role in what we do, but there's a piece missing that I think is pretty significant.
You're absolutely right. We really need to be sensitive to the cultural diversities, and we really need to find therapists and mentors and role models for these kids who are of their ethnic diversity. Yeah. And that's hard, but we're working on it.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like you know about that. So
yes, we're sensitive to that issue.
I'll stop spieling about that.
Right.
But anyway, well, one of the things I wanted to do is kind of get an overall picture of what it is that these children are experiencing, and then we will take a look at some point at what you're doing about it, okay? But let's take a look first at our continuum, the continuum of violence in a child's life. It starts out with entertainment violence and violent toys in popular culture, and then moves to exposure to real-world violence, then isolated, traumatic, direct exposure to violence in the home or community, and then lastly, chronic exposure to violence in the home and in the community. So in terms of the children that you're seeing, when you look at those levels, I mean, does that seem like a pretty universal experience that they've had, that they've seen it on TV and then?
Yes.
Okay.
And they are at the top of the peak in that they usually experience chronic levels of violence. These kids have witnessed violence, they've been the victims of violence, they've witnessed their parents being arrested maybe multiple times, they've witnessed law enforcement perhaps coming in and the difficulties that can go on in an exchange when law enforcement comes in, and so they are repeatedly traumatized by violence. They don't typically have the quality of care that other kids have, so that they do tend to watch more TV. They don't have money. They don't have the resources available that other families do. They move constantly. They go from caregiver to caregiver. They can't predict from one day to the next with, say, a parent who's using drugs or alcohol, whether that parent's going to be in the home that night or not. And so there's a tremendous sense of insecurity, and the violence is there. It's just an undercurrent. And so then we see them acted out. We have some of the kids that we're seeing at Friends Outside already flirting with gangs, or having been down to gang activity and considering that as an option for themselves, because they want a sense of belonging. There's not much going on at home for them, and it's a natural thing to turn then to some place where they feel safe and secure and valued.
Well,
and
it makes a lot of sense.
The gang becomes the family.
Sure, sure. But you know, one of the arguments I know even in mainstream media about entertainment violence has to do with the fear that it sort of numbs children or desensitizes them to the reality of violence. Right. I'm wondering if how that plays out with the children you work with.
The statistics are in, the research is in about the numbing and the desensitization to violence. Yeah, it's true.
Okay.
It is true. And so these kids get numb to this kind of chaos in their families. I mean, there is a numbing effect. That's a way to cope with what's going on because it's overwhelming. And some kids actually split or detach and minimize what's happening. It's as though it's not happening. They just can't deal with it. It's too traumatic.
Well, I guess I'm also wondering if that makes them more vulnerable to being violent themselves.
Absolutely.
It does, okay.
Yes. Okay. And then we see the aggression in the next generation, and again, back to what you said about the cycle repeating itself.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
Okay. Well, let's take take a look at our next graphic because there are some specific behaviors that you talk about for these children. One, you mentioned, the child may show new acting out behavior. The child may regress or act like a much younger child. A child may show out-of-control behaviors at times and may withdraw at other times. Those are the first three that come up for us, so let's tackle those one at a time here. In terms of acting out behaviors, I'm assuming that that's the violence that you were talking about.
Right.
Are there others that would be included as acting out?
Sometimes these kids actually choose to break the law themselves. Not only do they bully other kids at school or act aggressively with other people or aggressively with their siblings, but they may decide to shoplift, for example, or vandalize, or get involved in real delinquent behaviors. I recently had a case in my private practice where a young man who's been in the system since he was 12 was arrested 3 months after his father was arrested. And that was his first brush with the system. And it's like, well, if Dad's there, he doesn't care about me. If he loved me, he wouldn't do this. Therefore, I must not be lovable. And it's sort of an illogical mindset that gets constructed so that the youngster tries to make sense out of what's happening and can't, and just gives up and says, well, maybe. I've even had youngsters say, act out violently and get arrested so they could be, believe it or not, in prison where their parent is housed so that they could get connected to that parent.
That makes, actually, that makes sense to me.
Right.
In fact, I was even thinking, as I was looking at the boys this week, that for some of them, the structure of the ranch, the fact that the rules are very clear. I mean, I'm wondering if there aren't some of them that, given the chaos that they live in, might at times choose to act out to get the safety and the structure of incarceration. I mean, is that possible?
That does happen, and I've had clients report that when they have a sense that they're out of control, there's a relief in knowing that someone is going to set the limits.
Okay, so then they wound up with this containment.
Yes.
Okay, we're going to need to take a quick break.
All right.
Stay with us. When we return, we'll learn more about these children.